So, welcome to today's show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And on today's show, we have Rob. Thank you for joining us, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's 7:30 in the morning here in Boston, Massachusetts. The sun is peeking over the horizon, and it's a good day to be alive.
Awesome. Sounds like a great start to your day. So just tell our listeners briefly about a bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a little bit about me. About 10 years ago, I got into the world of holistic health by the way of a concussion. So that kind of flipped my world upside down. I can tell my story a little bit later, but kind of general brief, that's what got me into this. I'm 27 years old now. So the past 10 years, it's just been a journey of figuring my own health out. And so that has led me to become a holistic lifestyle coach, studying under Paul Chek. So basically, as we'll get into later, it focuses on 6 foundation principles, which I'll give a little teaser of now is moving, thinking, and breathing of the yang principles, and the yin principles being hydration, nutrition, and sleep. So those are the six that I focus on in my coaching. I also am a network marketing professional. So I work with organic non-GMO superfoods with a company that's going plastic free this year. So I studied sustainable food and farming in my undergrad. So anybody who is doing an act to help the environment has a place near and dear to my heart. So though that's kind of part one, and that's the main feature of Whole Health Connections, which is my first business baby, about 2.5 years old. And my other one is Ice and Iron, focused on building community.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. And we're super aligned with what it is you do and your mission with everything that you're just said in mind is what we kind of hold dear to the heart as well, wellness theory. And it's something that I'm really excited to get into in this conversation. So let's kind of just start at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit more about your concussion that you experienced and how and why you've ended up really where you are doing what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was 17 years old. It was the summer and I was water skiing. So kind of a freak accident. And, back then, not that it's terribly small now, my ego was pretty big back then. So it's definitely come down to more manageable size now. But basically, with all my cousins and my uncles and, I had the ego. I wanted to hold on to for dear life, no matter how challenging it was, whether it was tubing or water skiing. So their intention was to get me off the water skis. So they did just that, but I flipped over the wave. My skis hit me right underneath my eyes. So I blacked out in the water, kind of woke up hyperventilating. And then at that point, I had very sensitive to light. If I moved too fast, I get very dizzy and lightheaded. And so at that point, I was a state swimmer. I was an athlete, played lacrosse and football and basketball. And so I had to figure something else out. And somewhere along the line, someone was like, "Oh, have you ever tried yoga?" And, about 10 years ago, it was not very popular for a 17-year-old guy to be doing yoga. So it always, if you're going on to these yoga classes with, women usually in their late 20s, 30s, 40s. And so a lot of times people are like, "Oh, are you in the right place? This is yoga." So kind of having to break through that barrier led me to meditation. And I was actually I went to University of New Hampshire my first 2 years of college before transferring to UMass Amherst. And I was the first guy to ever join the UNH yoga club. And same thing, asking me if I was in the right place, knowing where I was. And we had this lady from India come over who had been studying meditation, I think it was for 46 years. She was this little old lady and she was a guest teacher. And all of a sudden we dove into meditation and I could not even believe that my brain could do the things that happened in that meditation. So that was a whole new rabbit hole. And that led to me studying psychology, neuroscience, nutrition, and all this led to, the food systems and soil health and farming. So I worked on a few farms over the course of college. And then over the course of that, I did some internships with some holistic nutritionists, worked with acupuncturists, started getting massages after my concussion as well. So that was kind of just this, again, diving down this whole rabbit hole. Ended up graduating from college in 2016, and then ended up going to Asia in 2017 and really going into the Eastern world. And I'd always been very intrigued by that. And my good friend from UMass, he was Sri Lankan. So he was born and raised there. He came to the States for the end of high school and college. And so I dove into that culture in Sri Lanka for about 2 months and was being fully immersed in this Eastern culture. No one else spoke English except for him and his family, who spoke some broken English. Um, you know, most of them didn't have televisions, radios, TVs, just kind of middle of nowhere Sri Lanka, like not a tourist area at all. I was on a farm. So a lot of these people had never seen a white person before, never seen someone with blonde hair, blue eyes. So sometimes traffic would stop. Like if I was walking across the street, people would stop and stare and even ask my friend, what is he? Why is he here? Like all these questions, pointing and staring. And it gave me a really great perspective of what it was like to be a minority. Because obviously it's not something here in America as a white guy that I can ever really experience. So it gave me a very different perspective just on life in general, seeing how happy these people were, having basically, what I, as an American see as nothing. They're living in tiny huts the size of my bedroom for a family of 5 or 6, and they're all happy. And they're all, very curious. Like they're curious as to what I was about. We taught each other, I'd point at a stick and say stick in English. They'd say it in their language. And so that was just a really mind-opening experience. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2018 to join a small startup company, as I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I joined a small startup company, which, long story short, did not quite start up. So I moved back to Boston in 2018, late fall, with $10,000 in credit card debt. And decided at that point, I was done working for the people, building other people's dreams, and it was time to take things in my own hands. So that's when I started Whole Health Connections, and couple weeks after my birthday in September. September 18th was the start date of 2018. And then at that point, it was just been this journey of, really recognizing how much personal growth I have to go through to create a business that I can actually sustain myself in. And so along that way, I led an after school program for kids ages 5 to 11 while I was building on my business. I have a stable source of income. I was teaching them gardening and meditation and yoga and all these fun activities that I wish I had been taught as a kid. And yeah, so then about a year ago when everything shut down, I was forced into going into my business full time, which was a little scary at first because, I lost my stable income, paying for health insurance and all those type of things, but it turned out to be an incredible opportunity in disguise. And I cannot be more grateful for where things are today.
Listen, I love that. I mean, there's so many elements there that we can resonate with. There's so many elements that intrigue us as well. And so thank you so much for sharing all that with us. And I think you kind of answered what I was going to ask you next, which was like how and why are you showing up in the world in the way that you are. And you touched upon something there. You said something that I really feel personally as well. And that's teaching other people the things that I wish I'd been taught. What's your kind of take on that? Why do you show up in the world the way that you do now in service to others?
I mean, I think it just comes back to that pain point. I think that's for a lot of people on this health journey that had a pain point. For me, it was the concussion, which at the time seemed like the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to me. Wanting to be an athlete, and that again, that 17-year-old male ego can be pretty strong, and not being able to do all these things that my friends are doing. But when I really look back, I think that was the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life, because it forced me to go down this path and really change myself. And not to say that I always was that whole way the whole time. And, in college, there's kind of two versions of Rob that were fighting the party in Rob, then the health Rob, where I go out to a party. The next day I'd be doing yoga and meditating and trying to balance that out. And eventually the healthy version of Rob won out the battle. But yeah, so I'd say at the end of the day, it's recognizing that we all, no matter who we are, have some level of pain, some level of trauma, some level of challenge in our life. And so the reason why I do this is because I know how challenging life can be. And, I had a lot of insomnia as well after the concussion. So just doing what I can to just help people make their lives a little bit easier. Because at the end of the day, I think we overcomplicate life, and a lot of us think that we need to suffer to be successful, or suffering is, an inherent part of life that we have to go through. But, I want to tell people that there's a better way.
And it's just so kind of like refreshing to hear like your story. There's so many points in your story where you could have just said, screw it, I'm not going to carry on. I'm just going to use my concussion, or use the fact that you try to start your business, your first business, and it didn't work out. All these things could have been used as excuses to not go any further and just kind of bring yourself back, regress back into a more comfortable state and stay there, which a lot of people tend to do. And you just keep going from one experience to the other. And I love what you said about life being challenging and not being hard. Like, it is a challenge. Challenges are good. They help us grow, and life isn't hard. It's not meant to be hard. But those challenges help you to grow and help to build you into who you are. And regardless of what happens, and yeah, it might have been challenging, but you obviously you learned something from that challenge, whether it worked or it didn't work, and you found another solution and another way to work, and you kept building upon that. And I think if everyone can take that and not see if it doesn't work out for them as a failure, as more of an opportunity to learn something from that and grow, then they can keep going from one experience to the next and keep maybe failing and trying something else and failing and trying something else, and then getting to a point where all those failures have taught me to basically be, I don't know, stronger, more robust, or more experienced, and learn more about what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that kind of the direction you want to go in, and take you to where you are currently now, really serving and helping others.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the kind of big thing for me as well is that I was lucky that I was already studying personal development when, that first business didn't go well, because like you said, if I wasn't, I definitely would have just gone back and gotten a job like every single person in my family was telling me to do, the safe thing to do, the smart thing to do, go back and get a real job. But, what I was able to glean from that was I saw all the warning signs. So kind of give a little backstory. It was a startup company. It was 11 people in it. So, very small. And a couple of the people who were, there were 4 owners, and 2 of the people were doing some shady things behind the scenes, kind of really taking advantage. And we were wondering, how is this happening? Because, we're doing all these sales, but the revenue is not coming up. So basically they were kind of stealing from the company. But in hindsight, I got to see all these warning signs, and I got to see all these little pieces that left clues that I noticed I ignored in the moment, because, I was like, I don't want to have to deal with that now. So it really taught me to just be aware of a lot of these little warning signs, and to look for things in the future that, hey, if I'm ever partnering with someone, they're doing these things, they may be up to something shady, because now I know that lesson. And I'm glad I learned that lesson, where I was invited in as one of the founding members of the business, but it wasn't, my business per se. So it was actually kind of the best way possible that I could learn that lesson, as opposed to my own business, me bringing in people and having it destroyed that way. So like you said, I think it's just recognizing that every challenge we face is just an opportunity to learn. Win or succeed, it doesn't really matter. It's just feedback.
Yeah. And it's having that feedback, like you quite rightly said there, is listening to that feedback, and also not judging it for being like the most terrible thing or the most wonderful thing. It's about actually looking at it from a resourceful place and being able to step back to see, okay, how does this fit in with your model of the world now you have this in your awareness. What is that next step? Now, you mentioned something earlier. The second part of your baby is community. And is community something that's been one of like the key learnings that you've taken over the years, and that's why you've kind of come into it? Or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's funny because, again, I think in high school, I knew the importance of community with sports, and I had a pretty close group of friends. And then when I went to college, in my first couple of years, well, my first year really, I was, pretty sick. I bruised my spine, just again, male ego, flipping into my pool, hit my spine on the side of the pool. End up getting mono, getting all these sicknesses because I just, kind of burnt myself out and was drinking a lot, and on top of these injuries and having sicknesses. So my first semester of college was pretty brutal. So, and that was, all self-induced really. So I then had a lot of time in isolation, and a lot of time, not being in community, and really kind of getting into this, I wouldn't call it a deep depression, but, a mild depression, where I was kind of like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to be here. I don't know anybody. Like, I'm sick, I'm injured. This sucks. So kind of going from that perspective. And then I remember then it was tough to make friends, because, everybody makes friends their first semester of college. And meanwhile, I was laying in bed, kind of having poor me syndrome. So it was tough to then kind of bounce back from that. And then, then when I transferred to UMass my junior year, I met some cool people. But I went a couple of years really without having a close group of friends. I'd still would see my high school friends, all these people. But I think, I'm thinking about this out loud right now, that kind of gave me that contrast of not having community. And then going to Asia, seeing how tight-knit these communities were, how caring and loving they were for each other. Parents would be taking care of other people's kids like they were their own, just because it was like they were such a close-knit community. And then last year, when everything locked down and everything was deemed essential, what's not essential, and spending, the first couple months while everyone's trying to figure out what actually is going on, realize just how essential community is. And that no matter what, a government figure tells you, whatever, community is absolutely essential. We are, tribal people. We are community people. We communicate by, like, just not being over a phone, but seeing reactions, feeling each other's energy, all these different factors, maybe can't be scientifically proven, but are absolutely essential to human connection. And so that really made me recognize how important connection is. And then working with my superfoods company, having the ability to connect with people all over the world during that time was like, wow, if I didn't have this, kind of be back to, where I was years ago, kind of in that isolation phase. So I just recognized how grateful I was to have this online community. And before that, we were building up our in-person community for Ice and Iron. But after that, we really have ramped things up this past year or so, in a very safe way that has been really, really enjoyable. And so community has really just shown me how essential it is and how it can really stimulate growth, that we can do so many things by ourselves, but we can do so many things so much better when we're with a group of like-minded people who are growing themselves and pushing each other, pushing, if I'm slacking off, say, hey, Rob, get your stuff together because I'm seeing you're slacking up, but I know you're capable of more. So I just think it's incredible. Again, I could go on and on about this, but it's really, really essential to have that community.
It's interesting because it sounds like, again, it's come full circle from your story earlier where you said you had that experience of feeling that the minority. And when you go back and look at the word community, it's about communicating, but then also unity. And when we can bring those elements together, that's when that sense of wholeness and true connection, I think, gets to actually pave the way for a really incredible future, right? And I just think it's something so powerful, and often it's sometimes a bit misunderstood, because you mentioned earlier about like having a close-knit group of friends, and then you mentioned that the online space and having like online connections. And I think in a world, and obviously this past year has shown people that online is an option, but sometimes the people in your immediate space are not maybe the people that are most conducive for your growth and for what it is you're looking for. What's your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. And about a little over a year, or maybe a year and a half ago, I had to make the difficult decision to step away from a lot of my high school friends because, again, they were the ones in my immediate surroundings. And, everyone's on their own journey, and I try not to share judgments about, where they're doing, but a lot of smoking and drinking and playing video games and eating crappy food, things that, I did in high school with them, not to say I never did that, but to me, it was kind of felt like it was very stagnant. And, there's a lot of arguing, a lot of bickering, kind of, trying to one up each other. And eventually I just kind of had to say, hey guys, this isn't for me, this isn't really conducive to my growth. And I think that was, definitely a very difficult conversation. And, a lot of them still don't appreciate it. A lot of them still don't understand, a number of them do. And I still talk to them and we're still friends, just kind of on a different level. But I think that the online space has opened a absolute world of opportunity that, even yesterday I was talking to a few people on the phone from California on my team, and just being able to coach them and, mentor them and have that ability that, yeah, I prefer to do it in person, but if it comes down to not at all or doing online, like, yeah, I'll definitely do it online. And I think that there's so many communities on there from, like the team I work with, between, these Facebook groups. There's so many different ways to find community online that if you set the intention and you do a quick Google search, like, you could probably find something out there.
Definitely. And like, it's been great, really, like, let's say, listening to kind of like your story and seeing how everything's combined, the challenges you face and how you've grown as well, and also just the effect you've had on people around you. So how do you translate that into the people you help? So like, well, what are the foundational principles that you use to help your clients?
All right, now we dive into the good stuff. Here we go. So this is, so the 6 foundation principles, this is something that, again, I think we all know to some degree. It's very simple, and that's why they're called foundational principles. But until my mentor, Paul Check, really laid them out for me, 2 years or so ago, 2.5 years ago, it was like, boom. Like now I know the framework. Because again, when I was trying to explain health to people, help people with their health, it was like, oh, you do this and then you do that. But there wasn't the structure. So for me, when I look at the 6 foundation principles, again, moving, thinking, breathing, predominantly yang activities, you're doing something, and then yin, nutrition, hydration, sleep, more restorative, more, it's more of a passive activity. It's more rejuvenating. But for each of those, there's a yin and a yang. So moving, exercise is a very yang movement, but doing something like Tai Chi or slow walking is a very yin movement. So when I look at these 6 principles, it's how can we balance each of those? Because for much of my life, I was way too yang. I was I was doing too much, moving too much, led to a lot of injuries, led to a lot of inflammation. So then it's like, all right, so if I'm really sore today, even though my brain tells me, oh, you should still work out, maybe I should do some yin movement, because the answer is not moving. Like, still move, but do it, in a more effective way that's going to help restoration. Could be a walk, could be yoga, could be, Tai Chi, something like that. And then thinking, the thoughts that we think ultimately create the reality. Because the 3 of us could be on a boat looking at the same view, and I could be thinking, oh man, this sucks. It's cold today. It's windy, it's yada, yada, yada. And you both could be like, wow, this is amazing. I've never been on a boat before. This is the best river I've ever seen. The sun is shining. Oh, I love the cool breeze. So our thoughts can just completely change everything. And sometimes, there's a word going around, toxic positivity. It's been flying around lately. And I think that is, to some degree, I think most people do need to be more positive, but also sometimes we can deny the negative as well. So again, it's just that balance. We need to acknowledge these challenges, acknowledge, the negative, which I'll put that in quotation marks, but it's all about the balance. And then same thing, we go down the whole list: moving, thinking, breathing. There's most of us are breathing shallowly into our chest through our mouth. And there is a time and a place from that. If you're running, that's a quick way to get just a pump and get your sympathetic nervous system activated. But most of us are sympathetically overly dominant to the point that we're stressing ourselves out all the time. So again, finding that balance. There's a time and a place for everything. That's kind of my main message to people, is that there's no such thing as a good or bad tool. It's just how you use it. Because if you're breathing slowly in and out through the nose, but you're trying to run for your life from a tiger, that's a terrible tool to use. But if you're trying to have a tough conversation, that's probably a great tool to use, going to stay healthy and grounded. And I'll kind of, go through the other 3 briefly. Is, nutrition. I was when I was studying with these nutritionists, I was like a dictator in my own life of my nutrition, to the point that it became unhealthy because it was creating stress around eating healthy, because I was supposed to eat a palm full of pecans and a palm full of almonds, instead of just like, well, I want to have some more, so I'm going to let myself have some more because I worked out today. My body needs it. So, and then, hydration, we can overhydrate. Most of us are underhydrating. And then sleep. Most of us are undersleeping, but again, you can also oversleep. So it's just about finding the balance within each of them and recognizing there's no such thing as a good or bad tool. It's just how we use it.
Absolutely love that. Like I say, that's something I can definitely relate to, and something we echo every time we do a video or we do anything. It's the whole thing. There is no such thing as good or bad or right or wrong. It's all your perception on what you're doing. So like I say, good or bad food, what's good for me might be bad for you. Who knows? And that's, I think, if everyone can just realize that is stop listening to the generic good or bad out there. Don't do this because it's bad for you, or we'll do this because it's good for you, and start actually listening to themselves and finding out what works best for them. That's when they'll find balance, and they'll start to find alignment in what they want. I was exactly the same as you when it comes to food. I wasn't going out. I wasn't socializing. I was eating 6,000 calories a day. I was so strict with my food. I was eating 9 meals a day, and I was strict. I literally down to weighing everything, preparing everything, and it was bland. It was like, I can't add any sauce on this. It has to be this because otherwise it takes me over
Right.
my macros or whatever.
Right.
And that was such an unhealthy attachment to food. And the funny thing is, it never got the result I wanted because everything just seemed so hard. And when
Right.
I started to relax and start to think, okay, well, I'm having this, but I fancy having this with it. And I just, okay, just have it with it. Like, no guilt, no judgment, no nothing. It's like, okay, if I want it, I'll have it. If I don't want it, I don't have it. And I won't force myself into a little box where it's saying, okay, I can only eat this way, I can only drink this way, I can only move this way. I'll literally do anything now based on how I feel, as opposed to what I think I should be doing.
Absolutely. And just like we just said, like that could be a tool that could be useful in a certain period. There's definitely times that could be, in a short period. Like obviously you don't want to live your life that way, but if you're trying to take some data and say, hey, if I eat like this for 30 days, how am I going to feel? If I eat like this for a week, how am I going to feel? I think again, that tool could be useful. And to your point of, what's healthy for me may not be healthy for you. With one of the nutritionists I work with, we had something called the food inflammation test. And so basically it was a blood test, and then it tested the blood against the proteins of 132 different foods. And so for my job for about 2.5 years was to make meal plans for people based on, the results on their blood tests. And, a lot of people are like, oh, what do you mean I can't eat chicken? Chicken's healthy. It's like, well, for you, it's actually not. It's causing a lot of inflammation in your body. And, people like, for me, squash is one that really, and eggplant, like really does not do well for me. But again, if you look at the studies, the science, oh, eggplant's really healthy for you as these benefits. Was like, well, for me, it actually doesn't. So I think a lot of that just comes with self-awareness. And also, I think science is a great tool, but it's not law. And I think that's a very, very slippery slope we're finding ourselves in, especially this past year, that science is law, but science changes. And also, I like to say, what if Newtonian physics isn't 100% accurate, which is what we're basing a lot of our science off? What if it's even 1% off? And then every year, if we're 1% off, now we're like 37 times off where we started, So point being is that, science is a great reference, but at the end of the day, your body is your science experiment. This is what's giving you the feedback you need. So if you eat gluten and someone says, oh, gluten's bad, but you feel great after having a piece of organic bread, by all means, eat that as often as it makes you feel good. So yeah, again, I could go on a whole tangent of that, but
Absolutely. Like this is so aligned with what we talk about all the time, isn't it? And it's great hearing it from your perspective as well, because like we're definitely operating from a very similar belief system. What I'm curious to know, and I think you might have touched upon it there, is you said obviously with these six foundational principles, you help people that you work with find that balance for them. Aside from the self-awareness that you just mentioned, or please obviously elaborate on that, what is it that you do specifically with them or help them to do to find that balance?
Yeah, so a lot of that is asking a lot of questions. So in terms of my coaching practice, when I'm working with a client, I'll give them a lot of questionnaires and tell them, hey, this may take 2 hours for you to fill out, because the more information you can give me, the better I can help you. Because, one of my mentors always says, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So getting as much data as I can. And again, taking all that with a grain of salt, because again, we may all be biased, that they may be telling me that they're better than they are because they don't want to feel like, they're a bad person or they're really unhealthy or whatever. So a lot of that also does tell me their mindset. If they tell me that, then we have a conversation, then it conflicts with, the data that they gave me, then sometimes I know, oh, hey, maybe they've got some thinking going on that maybe needs some working. So in terms of finding that balance, kind of first start with, what does their lifestyle look like? What symptoms are they experiencing? If they're experiencing stress is a symptom, it's a reaction. It's not like a inherent thing that we should all be experiencing on a regular basis. Do they have pain? Do they have inflammation? Kind of just taking inventory. So if someone is, for instance, feeling weak, they don't have a lot of strength, they're not exercising, I'll probably suggest some, I guess we go prescribe, I'll suggest maybe some more strength training. But if they're, a stressed out professional who's already completely, working 16 hours a day, not sleeping, not taking care of themselves, I probably won't tell them to go work out because that's going to overload the system. I'll probably go tell them to go for a walk, maybe go for, do some 5 minutes of Tai Chi in the morning, do some stretching. So I think it just comes down to finding where the individual is at and then, putting them on that spectrum. So let's say they're too yang on the movement. All right, we got to bring them back to balance. We got to do more yin. Oh, they're thinking too much. They're too analytical. All right, let's do a little meditation. Let's bring them back to balance. So it's really just about getting them back to that baseline, getting them back to that balance. So someone could be very yang in movement, very yin in nutrition, all over the spectrum. So at the end of the day, it's just helping people get back to that balance.
Beautiful. Yeah, and that's something that's so incredibly important for anybody that's listening, and that's something that somebody listening can literally do for themselves. Literally just think about their own life and almost just observe for a while and see where do you think maybe you're overdoing it, where do you think there's an opportunity to pick something else up, because naturally it will start to align. And one of the things I'm curious to know from you is, when you do this work with your clients, what are the consequences? What do you notice? What are the results that they kind of end up with?
Yeah, and one thing you said that they can do this themselves. I tell them that from call number one. My goal is to make you independent from me as quickly as possible. Usually depending on the program, I'll do anywhere from like a 10 to a 12-week program because I don't want someone to be with me for a year. I don't want them to need me for a year. I want them to, maybe after that we'll do a check-in call every couple of weeks or every month. But, for our weekly call, I don't like after like a few months, like I don't want you to need me. I don't want you to become dependent on me. And like, I don't want to be a crutch for you. I want to give you the tools and let you figure it out. So I'd say, the biggest thing is that people need to be willing to change is really what it comes down to, is that it starts with the mindset, because you could have the best coach in the world. They could give you all the best tools. You could go see the Dalai Lama to learn about the best way to meditate, the best way to be, present. But if you're not open to becoming present, you're not open to learning to meditate, it doesn't matter. So I think that for me, a lot of it's depending on where the person's at. It starts with, kind of opening up to, hey, you can change. You have the ability to change, and that can take a while. Because if we've built up these walls in our head, these layers of armor, sometimes the first few weeks are just me getting a crowbar and prying back their armor so that they can even be receptive to what I'm saying. And sometimes, I recognize that. So I was like, hey, like this week you're going to go for a walk, and then, do a little Tai Chi, and then do a little journaling, and just kind of get them out of that normal routine slowly but surely. Because again, some people we can dive right in, go full force, but most people, they need that slower approach. So yeah, we just got to get out of our own way.
Absolutely. That honestly, like, I'm loving speaking to you because it's just so on point with, like, I literally posted something today about like the 3 levels of stress that need to be addressed. And the first one is like the life level, in terms of, we've got all these spinning plates. If we're trying to make sure one's plate's not dropping over here, we're then taking our eye off something over there, and then something else is potentially sliding. And it's about finding that balance. And so sometimes we do need those life management skills. But when we get into the health level, which is the second level, that's where like the 6 core principles that you've been talking about, and we kind of have something similar with our kind of 8 wellness practices. And that is the point in which people can start to pivot. That's the point where they start to actually own their wellness, essentially, and then their own vitality. And then that's when they get to that point, like you said, of change, where actually, do you know what, I can do this. If I actually start acting upon these things, well, wow, then you're worlds apart from potentially where you were spinning all those plates. And then the third level really is what we call like the root level, and that's where, like you said, is like you kind of teach somebody everything that they really need to know in terms of the tools in a very short space of time. But sometimes we need to go deeper than that. Sometimes we need to dive like below the wave and really see, okay, what traumas are showing up, what are those patterns, what pent up emotion are you carrying that's maybe preventing you from implementing some of these health habits that you've described as well. And I think it's so important for anybody listening is to just recognize, like, where are you at? Are you trying to put out fires all day, every day, and not even noticing that you've got these foundational pillars that can really hold you firmly and so you can be your best? Or is it that actually, do you know what, you're really struggling to get any kind of grasp and you need to dig deeper? I think it's important for somebody to kind of step back and get that perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. And, one thing that I want to mention as well is that as I'm diving into these 6 foundation principles, I'm starting with stress. I don't always tell them that, but at the end of the day, we got to peel back that layer of stress, because stress, especially chronic stress, our bodies are very well adapted for acute stress. Our bodies are intended to deal with acute stress from, again, think of survival. We may have to deal with freezing cold over the night before we had shelters, and we may have to deal with sweltering heat as we're going through the desert to find food. We may have to deal with the adrenaline rush, the muscle fueling that it takes to hunt, to run away from a predator. So we're very good at acute stressors and recovering from that, but it's this chronic stress. And again, these same systems that were used to run from a predator are now when we're having a fight with our spouse or a tough conversation with our boss. And we have these same hormones, these same, cortisol, adrenaline, all these like neurotransmitters that are going through our body that were intended to help us fight or flight, that are now just causing a lot of inflammation and a lot of other challenges in the body. So we need to clear that cloud of stress that can completely block our rational thought.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see the same person in a stressful environment versus a calm environment. It's almost like 2 different people.
Yeah.
Because you're not thinking clearly. And that's where people say things they regret. They do things that they regret. It's very rare that you see someone thinking clearly, calm and collected, and doing something that they say, oh, I wish I didn't do that later. Usually it's when you're in that state of stress. So to me, like you said, we need to recognize where people are at and then peel back these layers of stress and figuring out where the stresses are coming from. Because that can also be like, whether it is, you have some friends that are causing you stress, whether it is, maybe an environmental stress. Maybe you have, some mold growing in your house. Maybe you have, electromagnetic frequencies that you can mitigate if you turn off your Wi-Fi at night that's causing your stress and your body. So there's so many different ways that some of it's like playing detective, like playing detective. Where are these stressors coming from?
Definitely. And that's, again, that's a huge thing that we actually like to focus on with clients, is because exactly like you said, until we can help them to understand and delve deeper into where their stress is coming from and help them to manage it and to understand that they don't need to feel unhealthy stress anymore. And they can then activate those stress response as and when they need, depending on the situation they're in, and then how to get out of that and come into a more relaxed state. That's when they start to kind of step into more of who they actually are. And they start to want to then grow and do more and help more and obviously serve more. And like you said, because when you're in that stressful environment, all you're thinking about is yourself. You're thinking about, like, you don't care about what's going on around you. You're just thinking about what you don't want. I don't want to be stressed. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to be around these people. I don't want to feel like this. And then when you can help them manage it and understand it more and become more aware of it and get rid of that unhealthy stress, then they start to become a bit more, again, resourceful from a like a restful, a calm state, a more resourceful state. And then they start to think outside of themselves as well, and how they can make more of an impact as well on the people around them and on the world around them. And that's kind of one thing that the kind of message we try to tie in with people is like, okay, it's great working on yourself because that should be your priority. But once you've kind of got yourself in order and you're starting to think more resourcefully, is now the next step is how can I now take that into the world and help make a difference on a global scale? Because it's like, it could be something small, it could be something big. It doesn't matter. Any impact that you have, any positive impact will have impact on the people around you. So I think it'll be interesting to know from your standpoint, what do you think, like, what are the causes that are most kind of close to your heart when it comes to kind of like the global initiative and all the issues that are happening out there? How do you think, or what do you think really needs to come to the forefront of people's minds and what they need to be kind of focusing on from your opinion?
Before I answer that, I want to reflect on what you just said there because you hit on some really good points. And like you said, when we're in this state of stress, we are only focused on ourselves. When we're in pain, you know, it's funny because I recognize it. I rarely get sick, but when I do, honestly, I don't give a crap about what's going on in other
Yeah.
people's lives. I just want to feel better. So it
Exactly.
gives me, gives me sympathy for people that are going through that on a regular basis. Or, you have an injury, the whole world just boom focuses in on that pain. So it's hard to even think about other people.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big challenge, which I see a lot of people kind of adopting this victimhood mentality in our day-to-day life now, that it's kind of poor me syndrome. Look at me, I'm in pain. Look at me, I'm this. And a lot of that isn't necessarily their fault. It's the fact that we are living in this state of chronic stress that, like you said, a lot of people aren't even capable of seeing outside of that mentality, kind of tapping into that abundance mentality, into that other people helping other people mentality, because they're in so much pain and stress that they can only focus on this. Why is this happening to me? How is this always happening to me? Those victim mentality. So like you said, we got to take care of ourselves first. And that's where, in Paul Chek's teachings, he has something called the I, the we, and the all. So we need to focus on the I first, yourself,
Mm.
the we, the people closest to you, your partner, your family, your close friends, and then focus on the all. Because if you see a lot of people, these leaders of the world right now that are so focused on the all, a lot of them are the most unhealthy people. Most of them have terrible relationships. A lot of them are cheating on their spouses, they're divorced, they're whatever, their friends are backstabbing them, but they're so focused on the all, trying to, do everything for everybody else. So we need to go in that order: I, we, then all. Because if we don't, things aren't going to work. You could be the richest person in the world, you could be the most successful, have the most power, but if you can't sit alone with yourself, you don't have healthy relationships with the people closest to you. Like, to me, it's like I wouldn't want that. so I think that that's a really important perspective that you brought up there, is, focus on the self first, so we have the ability to even focus on helping other people. And then your question was about, how can we help global issues? Is that how it was?
Yeah,
Okay.
so like once you focused on I, obviously, and then based on that, you will have definitely, how you show up will definitely affect the people around you, no doubt about it, because obviously the energy you put off and is going to have an impact on those people. And then growing out from there into more of a global, like focusing on the all, is like, in your opinion, what are those kind of, what are those causes that you feel that need the attention right now? Because obviously everyone's got the things that are dear to their heart in terms of what they feel that they want to help or do, or kind of just get stuck into and help out. Like, what are yours? What are your causes that you really feel strongly about?
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest thing for me is recognizing that we need to be more connected with our planet. I think it's very easy to say, oh, we're humans, we have consciousness. These are just resources we can just pick and choose and do whatever we want with. But at the end of the day, we are raping and pillaging our planet. Plain and simple. It is sad to watch how we are treating this. We used to talk about how terrible it was that people go into villages and, rape and pillage the whole village. That's exactly what we're doing to our planet right now. And it saddens me to watch it happen. And it causes a lot of anger in me to watch it happen, knowing that people are doing this knowingly and willingly just for profit, just for a piece of paper that we have given imaginary value to. And that's really what it comes down to, is that we have given paper, a piece of paper that we say has value because we've all agreed upon that. We're giving that more value than what is actually allowing us to live here in the first place. So to me, I think the first thing we need to do is reconnect with nature. And that's one of the most common things I tell people is, go for a walk and go barefoot if you can. Just get outside, get in the sun, connect with nature. Because when you connect with nature, it's easy to be in a box inside with fluorescent lights and be like, oh, I don't need nature. I have Wi-Fi, I have technology, I have heat, I have air conditioning, all these type of things. When you actually go out in the elements and you recognize, wow, look at these trees. These trees are creating the oxygen that allows me to breathe. Wow, there's terrible storms and their roots are so deep that they can hold themselves in there. They don't need us. Nature doesn't need us. We're the worst thing that's ever happened to this planet. We are parasites on this planet. So to me, it comes down to, what can we do to help restore the balance within nature. Because we're on a very slippery slope right now as it relates to the environment. And I'm not one to be a doomsday prepper and say, hey, the world is ending. There's nothing we can do. I think there's definitely been some irrefutable, evidence that there's some things we can't change, but we can, again, they're learning curves. So my hope is that we can recognize, hey, we've done some really bad damage to this planet. So let's learn from that and never do that again. And so for me, little practical steps, I just tell people, grow something. If you can grow, cilantro, I always use that example. I don't know why it always pops in my head, but if you can grow some cilantro in your kitchen, under the light that's in your kitchen or in the windowsill, cool. If you can also grow some lettuce, awesome. Just grow something that, because you think of at a farm, the farmers are generally not being paid enough. Most of them are using terrible chemicals that are destroying the planet. So if you think of, let's just use an organic farm to avoid the chemicals, but if someone's at a farm, you go there, they harvest it, they put it in a truck, they deliver it to a grocery store. Then from the grocery store, you drive to the grocery store, you get that food, then you drive back. There's a lot of energy, both in terms of human energy, what we're using in time and energy, but also, resources in terms of gasoline and fossil fuels and all these type of things that if we just grew some of the stuff on our home, what if we saved one trip to the grocery store a month? That's minimum. That would make a big difference if 7 billion people spent one less trip a month. So I think that it's easy to say, oh, we have to do all these crazy things, but let's just start somewhere. Start somewhere easy, And the challenges with recycling, I think people say it's a great solution, but unfortunately, recycling centers are so overwhelmed. If there's an ounce of dirt or food or something on them, they just throw them away because they don't take the time to do that. So it's reusing and also just not using things like plastic. And that's what I love about this company I'm partnering with is that they're going plastic free this year. So their bags are made of biodegradable hemp. So I put those in my compost when I'm done with them. So it's just about making shifts and voting with your dollar. I think that's what it comes down to is that, we have the opportunity to create the reality we want simply by our daily actions. If you choose to, if you live in a city and you choose to ride a bike for that 10-minute bike ride as opposed to a 3-minute car ride, one, you're getting a little exercise, and two, you're using your bike instead of using your car. So I think there's just so many little actions we can do that it can be overwhelming for people to think, oh, we got to save the planet. We got to save the planet. Again, start with yourself. What can you do today? Instead of getting a paper bag at the grocery store, bring a reusable bag. If we all did that, again, that's 7 billion less bags a day if we all are using a bag a day. So, I could go on a whole nother tangent on this. This is definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart, but yeah, it just starts with doing the small actions we can every single day.
And that's perfect, and that's one of the reasons why we asked you that question, and we're asking our guests that question now, because it's one thing, people listening to this that are feeling stressed and want the tips and the tools and they want to know the how, but it's important sometimes to understand just how the smallest things can make a world of difference. And I think that's where that sense of power comes from in terms of empowerment as well, because not only are you doing it for yourself when you take care of your health with the foundational principles that you've mentioned, but also then when we start to pay that forwards. And you hit the nail on the head there where you said sometimes it's overwhelming to think, what, little old me, how can I make a big difference in this big world? We can feel so insignificant, but everything that you just mentioned there, like with your tips, like just grow something, just go to the grocery store like once less per month and you will be having an impact. And I think just people knowing that that's an option and that one act can make a difference, I think that can have a ripple effect across the world, hopefully, obviously is the plan, and start putting humanity back on the right track. That's kind of our goal. And one of the things we always talk about wellness theory is we help people to let go of unhealthy stress so they can leverage that wellness, so they can start to have that all mentality and start to lean into the causes that really are close to their hearts as well. So I absolutely love what you're doing. It's just all round with the whole foods business, with the wellness practices that you're obviously like leading as well in your community. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really good. And I think a lot of people will be inspired by everything you've shared so far today.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And again, same thing with the environmental impact is that that's those same ideas can apply to our health. You know, if you walk barefoot to get your mail instead of putting on shoes to get your mail, you're getting a little bit of grounding. You know, maybe you're walking on concrete, so it's not as good, but, you know, I always opt to walk on the grass where I can. But just all these little things. You know, if you choose to, you know, in the winter, instead of bundling up to get your mail, go out there in just a t-shirt, give yourself a little cold exposure, give yourself, you know, a little I can do this mentality. Don't start at anything crazy. Like, you don't need to be doing a 5-minute ice bath like I do. Like, start with going out there in the winter in just a t-shirt for 30 seconds. Turn your shower down to cold for 5 seconds. Guess what? You're also using less heat, so you're saving a little bit of energy. So again, there's so many different ways that, generally speaking, if we are actually helping ourselves, we are, generally speaking, helping the planet as well. Yeah, me going barefoot, I'm not buying as many shoes. I don't need to buy as many shoes. I don't need to use all these resources. You know, me going out there in the winter in less layers, you know, I don't need to buy as many clothes. So I'm not using all these manufactured goods to, you know, create all these fossil fuels to, you know, use all these resources. So in my view, if we're taking care of ourselves in some way, shape, or form, you're inherently taking care of the planet. If you're eating organic food, you're not consuming food that is spraying toxic chemicals over this planet. So you're helping the planet. So I think it's also giving ourselves credit for the little things we are doing and saying, all right, so now what's another little thing I can do? Not what is something I'm going to do that's going to be completely unsustainable that I won't be able to do because it's so much, it's a big change. Like, if you don't want to grow your own compost and then, you know, start your own whole garden, that's fine. You know, maybe start a compost and just, you know, put the compost in the back of your woods. Or, you know, if you have a town pickup, you know, sometimes local farmers will happily pick up your compost if you look for it. I know there's a lot of people in the towns nearby me. If you put your compost out, you tell the farmer, hey, you know, come get my compost. They collect it every 2 weeks or whatever, you know, the date is. So it's just kind of using the little things. Don't overstretch yourself. Start small and just slowly build up.
Perfectly said.
Yeah, definitely very, very, very powerful. And start small, and the ripple effect will just become huge. Definitely. So, obviously, what I want to ask you is, obviously, you've done a lot over the last, well, I don't know how many years. So, what's kind of the one new belief or behavior or kind of habit that has really made the biggest impact on your life over the last, say, 5 years?
5 years. Wow. All right. I got to think about that for a minute. That's the biggest belief or habit that has impacted my life for the past 5 years. You know, the first thing that pops in my head is mindfulness. And I think that can be broken down to a lot of pieces. So I used to meditate a lot, probably about 5 years ago, like every day, 20 minutes, you know, on like religiously. Now I don't really meditate as much in terms of sitting down, but I embody those principles throughout my life. I have many more of those moments, I think, add up to way more than 20 minutes. Like before this podcast, I took 3 minutes and just kind of, you know, sat still. It's not 20 minutes, but also when I first woke up, a new practice I've been doing is that as soon as I wake up, I start listing all the things I'm grateful for, as opposed to reaching for my phone, which is a terrible habit that has been in my life for a while. So someone told me, hey, you know, when you first wake up, just start listing all the things that you're grateful for. And now that has become an incredible habit that really allows me to put my mind on the right track right off the bat. But I think in terms of mindfulness, just doing everything more mindfully, like not having my phone when I'm going for a walk, not having my phone at dinner or lunch, or if I'm talking with someone, like I don't even have it on me. I mean, one, for the health benefits, I don't want to have electromagnetic frequencies buzzing my body the whole time, but a lot of it is just to be more present because, again, when you run an online business, it's easy to be like, oh, notification, this could be business, got to, and like, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but it's just being more mindful and being more present. So I think the mindfulness has helped me in every single part of my relationships, you know, friends, with myself, not feeling, because I feel like it's easy to go on your phone and be like, wow, all these people are doing all these cool things. I'm here sitting in my room by myself. My life's pretty lame. And then you start watching, oh, they're also doing something cool. What am I doing here? And it's so easy to get caught down this downward spiral. Again, that victimhood mentality. So I think mindfulness has been the biggest thing, because it spreads to every aspect of life. With my work, again, I haven't checked my phone this whole time while we're on this podcast. Before I got up, I checked it briefly just to make sure, we're still on for the podcast, but it's like, there's no cancellations, but it's like, for the most part, just trying to be more present. And I think that's just, with your relationships, I think I've been with my partner now for a year and a half or so. Before that, dating, when I was dating, if some girl took out her phone in the first few minutes of a date, it was like, oh man, like, I don't know if this is going to work, because there's no presence. And to me, it's just like, I want to be fully present with people. So I think that mindfulness has definitely fundamentally changed my life in every aspect. And that's the first thing that popped in my head.
Beautiful. I love that you've shared that as well, because presence, again, just go back to briefly what we mentioned earlier about that ripple effect, just being truly present with someone, that alone, take it everything else that we've talked about, that alone can have such a big impact, not only on the individual but on the whole as well. And I think that's a great one that you've shared, because I love that you've said there that mindfulness is also different for different people. It's not just 20 minutes, you must do it because you saw something on Instagram that told you should, right? Doing it actually because you're embodying it, and you genuinely have a solid intention behind that as well. So it's so powerful.
Yeah, and one thing I want to just kind of share on that real quick too, that popped in my head when you're saying that, is that one interaction of mindfulness can completely change someone's day. And my intention when I go to the grocery stores now, because everyone's wearing masks and everyone's in a stress mode, is like, just make one person smile. Make the person at the cashier smile. Like, that's just like, talk to them, because most people are on their phone. Oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, good. How are you? Just kind of that small talk. No one really cares they're doing it. You're saying that to be polite, but it's like, if my phone is not in my hand and I'm making eye contact, hey, how's your day going? Oh, it's pretty good. So then you actually have that real connection. It's not like oh, I'm just saying this because I feel like I should say this. And I think that, like you said, just having that one conversation with one person, and I see this cashier smile, maybe they hate their job. Maybe they're working a minimum wage job. They don't want to be here. They're just counting the hours till they get home. And someone actually asks them how their day is, and they actually are making eye contact and really curious. So I just wanted to interject that, because that popped in my head.
It's huge. Like, I remember when I first had that, I think it was an epiphany for me. I was like 20 and I went backpacking, and I spent a good year in Australia. And it was there where I realized how much on autopilot I think I'd always being in the UK. And that's not a bash on people from the UK, obviously that's where we're from, but it's very much a case of, well, actually people would ask when you go to the grocery store or you just out being social, people would ask, how are you going? Like, how are you? Who are you? Tell me about you. And and they genuinely wanted to know. But when they then came back to the UK and got into everyday life again, you just notice how much on autopilot the world really is. And like you said, they've got one eye on their phone or one eye on what they're doing next, and not paying attention to where they are. And that shift just completely made me more intentional. And then funnily enough, that's then ever since been a lot of feedback that I've gotten, whether I was working for somebody else or from clients, in the sense of, no, one of the things I really appreciate is the fact that you genuinely seem like you care and you listen, and I'm really proud of that, really, because it's something that I didn't used to be like, and I had to learn that, and I had to observe that, and it's so powerful. Like, I know sometimes it's hard when somebody's listening to these kind of conversations to think, oh yeah, it's just not one of those powerful tips or a powerful thing, but when you embody it and you embrace it, you feel that sense of peace that comes with it as well, and that good intention that's coupled with it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's what's so powerful about traveling, is that you get to disconnect from your normal reality and then have the contrast when you come back. And I remember that reminded me when I was coming back from Asia. I remember landing in JFK in New York, and this is the first time I heard massive amounts of English in like 4 months. And the first thing I noticed, everybody's complaining, everybody's stressed out, everybody's focusing on the next thing. They're not present at all. They're so focused on the future, complaining about the fact that their plane was 30 minutes late. And I remember being like, wow, this is probably what I was complaining about just 4 months before I left for Asia. This is probably how my brain is working. And I will never forget that moment where I was like, my life has completely changed. I cannot complain about these things that these people are complaining about, because I was just with people that don't have shoes, that don't have access to clean water. Some of the kids I was with were walking 5 miles each way just to get to school. And so coming back and having that contrast, I can't go back from that. I will never forget that blatant transition to hearing everybody speaking English and hearing it all being complaining. So yeah, I think it makes a big difference when we can mindfully be aware of all the changes that are going on in our normal environment.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. I agree completely.
Definitely. Listen, Rob, I just want to obviously thank you so much for sharing everything you shared so far. Now, before we kind of start wrapping things up, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation, or anything you think that our listeners really need to hear?
All right. This is my moment, I guess. This is my big message. Let's see. Well, I'd tell them that, or tell you as a listener, that you are much more powerful than you believe you are, or have been conditioned to believe you are. And I feel that much of my life, I grew up with a scarcity mindset with, this is my ceiling. This is as far as I can go. This is as much as I'm worthy of making. This is what's possible because, my family has this, my friends have this, putting myself into a box. So I just want to invite everybody listening to open that box, because most boxes have a cover that can be opened. If you're packing a present in there, you got to open that present. So you got to open that box. So open that box up and open it up to the infinite possibilities that lie in this world, because it's easy to label ourselves as whatever. I'm a student. I'm a doctor. I'm a coach. I work in retail. We label ourselves and we put ourselves in these boxes. And that's where, I see a lot of people that get to retirement, which I don't understand the concept of retirement. For me, I plan to be working my entire life because I love what I do. But I see a lot of people at this retirement age not even know who they are because they've identified so much with the box that they put themselves in. So I just want to invite everybody to open that box up and recognize that the world is our oyster, and not in the way of taking everything from this oyster, but recognizing that we have limitless possibilities. And if we can become more harmonious within ourselves, more harmonious with our planet, everything else will fall into place. If you can focus on being the best version of you, doing the best you can to help the people closest to you, be the best version of them, and just lead by example, the world will become a better place. And a lot of times it's the small actions that happen behind the scenes that make the biggest difference. And where everyone's on social media flexing, posting beach pictures, showing their fantastic life, whatever you're doing, recognize that the people posing in front of the Ferrari may have just found a Ferrari on the street and took a picture with it.
Yeah.
Maybe the people on the beach, that's a photo from 6 years ago, the last time they went on vacation. So recognizing that social media can often give a distorted view of reality, and recognize that your present reality is a result of the thoughts and the actions that you've taken over the course of your life to get you here. So if you want to change your life, change your thoughts and change your actions, and be patient, persistent, and consistent, and you will get there no matter how long it takes.
Beautiful,
Nice.
Beautifully said. I think there's nothing more to add to that. I think that's definitely food for thought for anybody listening. And we really appreciate you sharing that as well. And you can just feel how genuine and authentic that is coming from you as well, in terms of how much you genuinely believe that. And it's a really beautiful thing. Rob, just let our listeners know, where can they find you if they want to come and check out what it is you're up to?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This has definitely been a great conversation. It's really cool to see what you two are doing. And I think that we need more people talking about stress. Again, this is the overarching theme that is causing the biggest problems for most people in the world today in our modern era. And, I think that seeing you two do this together is also very inspiring. I think it's really cool to have, two people coming together to make something magical. I have my own podcast that I do solo, and I always love whenever I've had a few three-way conversations, and I think they're always really special because it's like this triangle, you're just kind of bouncing ideas off each other. So I want to encourage you both to keep doing what you're doing because you're doing great work, and I want to thank everybody listening. And the best way to get in contact with me is probably on Instagram, Whole Health Connections, WHOLE Health Connections with an S. Is my Instagram. And you can also go on my personal one is rob.carney1. That's where you can see Ice and Iron, and then also Lovely Lessons, which is something I didn't really talk about, but basically I've been publishing some children's books on mindfulness. So we got our first one published this fall, and our second one's coming out this spring. So yeah, you can check out all that stuff, and then also find Whole Health Connections there. Then my website is wholehealthconnects.com. So it is not Whole Health Connections because that domain was costing me $2,500. I figure for $100 I'll buy the Whole Health Connects, and when I have some higher resources coming in, I'll maybe buy that bigger one. But wholehealthconnects.com and Whole Health Connections on Instagram would probably be the best way to find me.
Awesome, brilliant. We'll stick all of those links in the show notes anyway, and make sure we tag you and everything, so we're super easy to find, because I'm sure after listening to this episode, people are going to be really, really interested in coming to follow your journey as it evolves even more.
Yeah, and I'd love to connect with anybody. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. I prefer to do voice memos or video calls. I try not to text. So if you do send me a message, you probably won't get a text back. You'll probably get a voice memo. So I'd like to keep it as, human as possible. But yeah, would be happy to chat with anybody that they have questions or just want to say hello.
Perfect.
Awesome. So, well, that's it for this show today. So I just want to thank you so much for obviously being on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.